Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Windy City Gridiron Radio of WindyCityGridiron.com on SB Nation. Your host, Robert Zaglinski, as always. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Follow Windy City Gridiron at Twitter at WC Gridiron. And I'm pleased to have a meeting of the minds with another young, rising football writer, Lorin Cox. This has been a long time coming. You can follow him on Twitter at CoxSports1. Lorin, what's up? I know you made the trip, so you might be the trip today, and then the rain threw you off at Bears camp. I know you might be a little testy.
Yeah, I'm gonna not hold back on any of these takes now. I drove 2.5 hours each way for 10 minutes of warm-ups before the rain shut us down today. But I love talking Bears. It brings my spirits up a little bit.
Yeah, even if they don't want to give you the extra preparation, or read a weather radar. I saw one of your tweets there.
It rained so little, just a quick little shower, and then everything was good to go. But practice was already indoors to the gymnasium where they didn't even have a field to work on.
Yeah, they just went through closed walkthroughs with, and then we had several artist renderings of exactly how that went. Anyway, so you've been to one practice, but you have a keen football mind, so you were able to discern a lot from what you saw. You went on Sunday, correct?
Yeah.
That's when I saw you, and I've been there since day one. So I wanted to gauge your thoughts on early camp impressions, storylines that have come out, and what you saw first before we dive into anything. We have the crazy Kevin White thing to discuss, but that'll come after this.
Yeah, as far as the big things, I mean, you have to start at quarterback, and it's sort of been as expected, I think, with all three of your quarterback. Well, all four if you want to include Connor Shaw, though the expected for Connor Shaw has been no contributions there.
He hasn't thrown a pass. I don't think I've actually seen him throw a pass other side from maybe like warming up, but he hasn't gotten any team reps. So yeah,
you got to feel bad for him too. Like, does you think he's out there wondering why he's here? Like he sees Baltimore's quarterback situation, sees Ryan Tannehill go down, and thinks, maybe they should have cut me back in June when they had originally wanted to.
Yeah, he's like, maybe I shouldn't have answered the phone. Maybe I shouldn't have made the 3-hour drive back up from Kentucky. I might be regretting this, but I think he probably sees the situation now as a camp arm, if anything. I can't speak to it. I feel bad for the guy, but regardless, the quarterbacks. I think it's about what like you said, it's about what we've expected. So Mike Glennon hasn't been spectacular. He's not like, so Jay Cutler, when he was here for years, he would more or less sometimes light up practice. None of these quarterbacks are doing that. And Glennon in particular, he's just been safe. So he's not making these deep shots, but he dumps the ball off more often than not. He'll take a shot every now and then. He's in what I've characterized as a quarterback. He's Brian Hoyer with a bigger arm. Meanwhile, so he's a safe guy who will occasionally make a better play than you'd expect. So he's the guy that has the athleticism Glennon could only dream of. The athleticism, the accuracy on the move, albeit against number threes, but he struggles with little things. So 2 times in 3 days, for example, in his progressions, he was fooled by Leonard Floyd, who should have picked up the pass on Monday. And on Sunday, he was picked up by Dave Jackson. So it's not just the fumbled snaps. He has a long way to go, which is something everybody expected, while having all of that raw talent. And then, Mark Sanchez he's not the butt fumble guy. He's just more or less somewhat he's a number 3, so he's a stable number 3 quarterback. You're not going to ask much more from what he's offered so far. He hasn't been good, but that his lame duck wobbly passes, occasionally leading some kind of drive-in team. I mean, that's what I've seen.
Yeah, Mark Sanchez, I don't think is here to ever see the field. I think if the Bears have an ideal world here.
Yeah.
I think he's, like you said, some lame ducks, some passes in the dirt for him. And I agree 100% that Glennon is sort of where you're at in terms of what you've seen from him in Tampa Bay. His most targeted routes are always the running back checkdowns, but when he had Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans on the outside, he'd throw up those deep shots and had a lot of success with just letting his receivers make plays on the balls rather than him putting a perfect pass downfield. It's more of just putting it up there and letting a guy come down with it. And we'll see if he can get that out of Cameron Meredith and Kevin White this year.
Yeah, he has similar kinds of options, and he also has a very deep tight end group to go to. Deion Sims, Adam Shaheen, Daniel Brown, Zach Miller, depending on how you feel about him. But the thing, I think the misconception that a lot of people have or had going into camp, because regarding this controversy, because I'm doing the air quotes because there's no controversy, is that as long as Glennon's playing like this, which would fine, more or less fine, okay, he's not in any danger of losing the job anytime soon. So for people that thought that Trubisky would start right away, or Trubisky would start 5 or 6 or 7 games in or halfway through the season, I mean, the Bears could legitimately do that redshirt thing or not have Trubisky appear until the very end of the year if Glennon's like this, especially with the underrated weapons like you just mentioned that he has.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend a lot on how Mike Glennon handles that early schedule, because if they get to week 8 and the bye week 9, and they're 2-6, maybe, if it started, even if he's playing at a decent level, but they're just not winning games, I don't think Chicago has ever experienced what we're going to experience this year in terms of the quarterbacks, of just having that Mitch Trubisky on the bench where every single mistake Mike Glennon makes is going to be magnified and amplified, and the roar and the murmur for Mitch Trubisky to be on the field is just going to grow more and more, especially with the way we saw Jay Cutler discussed among fans and the media for so many years. I think that the columns are going to start adding up, the tweets are going to start adding up, and if Mike Glennon struggles at any point in the early half of the season, it's a quarterback situation that we've never really seen in Chicago, because they've never had the luxury of having 2 quarterbacks that fans would want to see starting and could potentially be high quality starting players. So if things go poorly early on, I think we're going to see quite a novel uproar for what we've seen in Chicago in a long time.
I mean, a quarterback controversy, that's par for the course here. Not like this, definitely not like this, but Chicago's never happy with who the starter is. I feel bad for a guy like Glennon, because the impression every time he's spoken to us so far in post-practice pressers, I mean, this guy's, you feel for him. He's a nice dude. Everybody's talking about, I know he's talking about his leadership, how he's taking control of the team, how it's starting to show on the field. And here he has a rookie that he says isn't bothering him, because he's been in previous situations, like I just said, with Russell Wilson in college and with Jameis Winston in Tampa Bay. But that's definitely on his mind, that the future's just waiting, that he has a less of a margin for error of being successful, that he can't have a bad game. Otherwise, it could mean the end of his time here. I mean, there's an emotional side to this game too, and you can't help but notice that.
Yeah, I think he's done, like with Glennon, and I guess Trubisky too, in their own situations, they've done everything you want them to do to this point, and they've completely met or exceeded expectations in all of the off the field, and I guess I'd say all the on the field things, at least that we've been able to, watch so far. But it's still pretty early as far as on-field goes, but clearly they both all say the right things. They're well trained by this coaching staff to not misspeak in really any way. We haven't heard a single controversial slip up of Trubisky, not towing the line, or Glennon giving any sign of lack of confidence whatsoever. It's been very, very canned, but in a good way, of sort of not eliminating any doubt, at least up to this point.
I think the one instance we saw Glennon slipping up, if you want to characterize it, is in May OTAs, where he had like that little testy, this is my year, where he was annoyed at people asking him about Trubisky in a sense. But aside from that, he's coached up by the PR staff, by the coaching staff, really to not let any other information slip. I'm just curious to see how he deals with this. It's not an easy situation, especially for a 27-year-old quarterback. Not at all. Other camp impressions aside from the quarterbacks for you?
The thing I keep bringing my eyes back to on the defensive side of the ball is the safety position and how they're handling, and really all of the defensive backs with the rotations that they've been working. It's been disappointing not to see Marcus Cooper participating nearly as much as you would have liked to see, but you have a guy like Kyle Fuller taking over at corner. But with the spot opposite Quentin Demps, with Amos and even Eddie Jackson and Jones Corte rotating in there. I would have liked to see more Deion Bush up to this point, but again, I only got one real full practice worth of watching those safeties. But I guess I was surprised to not only see Jackson in there so early, but also a guy like Jones Corte in that rotation, picking up where he left off last year. I know he was sort of the camp, or one of the camp stories last year. It's easy to forget that he started to make a name for himself when he was more of the vocal guy in the secondary, and it was like, oh, this young former undrafted free agent is in here. He's barking at Alshon Jeffrey, he's barking at Kevin White. He brought this energy to practice, and that carried over into the regular season when things got a little bit more shaky. But clearly he hasn't just completely dropped off the map, and it's not as though the team is already, it's not like a guy like DeAndre Houston Carson where you kind of feel like he's more or less a camp body at this point. Jones Corte is right up in there in the rotation and competing for a starting spot once again.
I think in the case of, Jones Corte actually rolled his ankle, so I'm not sure how that's going to go for him.
Right.
He rolled his ankle on Sunday, so I'm not sure how that's going to go or before Sunday, so he wasn't practicing. Aside from the other safeties, throughout the practices, Deion Bush and Adrian Amos have been, to put it lightly, abhorrent. I mean, they're the guys, anytime you see me tweeting or any of the writers or beats saying like a tight end beat somebody in the red zone, it's more often than not Amos or Bush just being abused by a big body, big frame, not making any play on the ball. I haven't seen the only two safeties have actually made all of the primary competition. So if the competition is Demps, Jackson, HJQ, Bush, and Jones Corte, really only Jackson and Demps have made a play on the ball, and we've had 6 practices. I mean, some walkthroughs, but we've had 7 practices, 2 walkthroughs. Not the most heartening thing, and that's kind of why you've seen the rise from Jackson to this point, the 4th round pick. If everybody will remember, some had him projected as a 2nd round. You're kind of seeing that talent flash a little bit. You're seeing him on Tuesday. Yeah, on Tuesday, making the read from the other side of the field. It's Mark Sanchez, but reading his eyes and coming over and making a pick in the end zone in 2-minute drill. And he did the same thing on Sunday to Trubisky. So he might be in line to start in week 1 if he can carry this over to game action, especially if the Bears aren't pleased with an otherwise lackluster safety group. I mean, it'll be between the third safety will be between HJQ and Amos, and if HJQ can get healthy, he's probably better than Amos. I'll give him that.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this translates into live action, because I wonder how much the plays on the ball can get a little bit, I don't want to say overvalued, but in the sense that because they can't really pressure the quarterback and they can't hit the quarterback or bring the quarterback down, he more or less knows that he's going to get rid of the ball on every snap. And so it puts a lot of the coverage defenders in very difficult positions. And so when the quarterback makes a mistake, obviously because he's trying to throw the ball, no matter what, there's no reason to throw it away or take a sack. He's going to throw the ball downfield. So you're going to see more risky throws that can be turned into turnovers. But at the same time, you're also going to see defensive backs in coverage for 5, 6, 7 seconds, longer than they're rarely going to have to in a game situation. And I wonder, I guess, how much different it's going to be when they're in a preseason game and they know, 4 or 5 seconds at max is how long they're going to have to be in coverage. Most plays are going to be down in the 2.5 to 3 second range. And I wonder if that's going to benefit people like Amos and Corte, who aren't as much of the middle of the field, free safety range kind of guys, and more the cover the flats and sort of get that matchup and just make the tackle without allowing a lot of yards after the catch.
Yeah. Well, in the case of Demps, I'll note in the case of Demps, he's the guy he's guaranteed to start, right? We're in agreement on that. So he's going to bite anyway. That's kind of his thing. His scouting report that he's going to take the risk even when it's not there to go make the play. With Jackson, I guess if you're noting that, like, where they can react more, or they have more of the experience in regards to HJQ and Amos. I don't know. I really think the Bears are looking for. I mean, they're looking for that kind of free safety. They're looking for 2 guys. They haven't had that kind of consistent playmaking at safety in a while. And unless, and even while you have that point there with those two, they still have to do something in reaction where they realize that the pressure that plays could be finished, that the ball doesn't have to come into the air, that it's a different situation. They have to. I'm losing. I'm tying my tongue here. They can't be non-existent anytime there's a ball in the air. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that made sense. Yeah.
You piece it together, but yeah, I guess what I'm wondering what how much Vic Fangio is going to value specific skill sets, because clearly Jackson and Demps are similar in their range and their ball skills and their ability to create plays on the ball, whereas Jones, Corte, and Amos have been similar in their lack of range and ball skills, but their ability to wrap up consistently and come down and make plays against the run. And I wonder, obviously last year Fangio didn't have a lot to work with in terms of getting ideal archetypes at both safety positions. And I'm wondering how much he's going to value having, if he prefers having two guys that are more of those traditional ball hawks, and maybe Jackson and Demps aren't as consistent in stepping up and making a play against the run or taking on a block and being able to fill a lane, or if he wants to have more of a one of each, because they play so much single deep safety. It's more than 50% of their coverages are either cover 3 or cover 1. They're going to have one guy deep and one guy ending up either in man coverage or covering the flat. And I know he likes to be able to have both guys be able to do both, so it's not predictable in terms of who's going to drop back. But I wonder if he prefers to have a Demps Jackson with an Amos Jones Corte, or if he would prefer to just have two Dempses, have a Demps Jackson total starting combo with two guys that are more versatile in coverage, but maybe not quite as consistent in being able to step up in the box and make plays in the run game. Yeah,
well, for me, and I don't know how Vic's thinking of it, I'd rather have the guys that can play better in coverage. I'm not sure I would characterize Eddie Jackson. In fact, one of his knocks was that he wasn't a great tackler coming out of Alabama, that he was a guy that would make shoestring tackles but didn't have the best form, and that's kind of what led to some of his injuries. But I wouldn't characterize him as a bad tackler. He can make a play in the open field if asked to. Same thing with Quentin Demps. And to me, their ball hawk ability, which Demps also explained as you just can't explain it. You can't really give an actual connotation as to how it happens, as to how a guy's always around the ball. To me, that is much more valuable than a guy that's maybe a little bit above average in the box. And I'm not sure if Amos and Jones Corte are even do even enough to mitigate that factor.
And I think the big advantage that Eddie Jackson has here over the rest of the competition is the fact that he was a converted cornerback from Alabama. And so he is extremely effective in man coverage one-on-one, even in the slot or on the outside. And so it gives you more of that versatility that, you're not going to put Demps one-on-one against a slot receiver all that much, just because he doesn't have the short area quickness as much to be able to react to a route at the stem and follow through. But a guy like Jackson can do that when he's healthy, obviously, and he's healthy now, but I mean, he was banged up in college at times, and that's going to be the key for him to stay healthy. But I think Fangio is going to, I think that's why they brought him in more than anything, is because he has the combination of deep ball skills and the ability to come up and cover one-on-one, where I think I'm a little bit concerned with Jackson is at times he isn't as good at reading the quarterback as much as reading the receiver, which helps him out in man coverage tremendously, because he's able to just mirror the guy and understand what the receiver is trying to do to him. But when he's in open space in terms of coverage and just has to sort of watch the quarterback, sometimes he can get a little bit lost in terms of feeling where the receivers are around him. And, so if he's supposed to be the deepest guy in the middle of the field and the quarterback's looking right and Jackson is sort of shifting right with that, and he might miss a guy blowing by him on the left that he just didn't quite have the feel for. And I think that's where you're going to see his development need to come. And that would be the kind of thing that's going to hold him back, if something is going to hold him back from being a starter as a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move over to the tight ends, because that's probably the last big early impression. It's hard to evaluate the rest of the guys on the line of scrimmage this early. So Adam Shaheen, Deion Sims, Daniel Brown, Ben Bronker, yes, even Zach Miller, sort of been the talk of camp aside from the quarterbacks. I can't remember the Bears having this deep of a tight end group or projected talent at tight end in a long time, where they can go double tight. They might even be able to go three tight ends in a heavy formation. It's exciting to see, and it's exciting to have three or four guys that theoretically they're 6'5", 250, 260 you can throw out there with that just create matchup problems against linebackers, against safeties. And aside from Cam Meredith, I mean, the Bears offense, anytime I've seen it so far thus far in camp, has run through them, and the defense hasn't had any answers.
Yeah, and I think it is easier for big tight ends to look good in these kind of practices.
Yeah.
And not that that's not a knock against them. It's the same kind of thing with Tariq Cohen. When you have a guy that's fast like that, it is easy for them to look good because the defense isn't allowed to be physical. But again, that's not their fault. It's not a knock on them. It's just that, it's good. It's encouraging. They should be beating everyone else because they're bigger than everyone. They're if you can't get physical with them and really make contact with them down the field, they're gonna just body you and make plays over the field. So it's good that they're meeting expectations and potentially exceeding expectations in some case. But I'm a little bit less bullish on this tight end group as a whole. I'm not a huge Deion Sims fan, especially as I think he gets a little bit overrated. And from what I've talked to from people in Miami, he was not showing a lot there. So it's going to be, if he can put together a big season, it's going to be new for him. And I'm not 100% confident that he's going to be this game-changing tight end. And a guy like Shaheen, again, super encouraged about everything I've seen from him, but he's a little bit slow in his change of direction. And I think that's going to slow him down, at least in terms of his initial development. When he gets more physically smooth and natural and more used to, I guess, having to run a more complicated route tree, I think we're going to see him really blossom into an elite tight end. But I think for now, I'm envisioning the Bears using him in a limited fashion of sort of like, okay, you're big and you're fast in a straight line. So, you're still learning. So we're going to have a package of plays for you, and we're going to get you the ball in the red zone. But I don't see him being a super regular two tight end contribute. I mean, they'll do a lot of two tight end stuff with him. And I think they envision him taking over the Zach Miller role of being able to rotate in the slot pretty frequently. But I just don't know how early in his career he's going to be able to take on a lot of responsibilities in the offense, especially coming from Division II.
In the case of Sims, I had some conversations with them. I think part of the concern with Sims for me, because I do like him, but it was the concussion issues. It was the concussion issues that held him back. So he was never able to really take on a full-time role or blossom as other veterans moved out. Like Charles Clay was the starter who eventually moved on to Buffalo. Sims was never really able to fully step into that. I, for one, think he's actually very underrated. I think he's one of the best or more understated blockers in the league at his position. And with the higher volume of usage, I mean, 40, 45 passes isn't really out of the question for me. I know you called me out a little bit and comparing him to Desmond Clark, but that's kind of what he mirrors for me as a Bear.
I wasn't calling you out. I was literally I was agreeing with you that the number helped.
Oh, you were agreeing. Well, okay, that's better.
Yeah, that wasn't a criticism. I was literally like, oh, and the number helps too.
He's very Des Clark. Like, he's not going to be a superstar tight end, but he's a good blocker. He's and he can slip out for a pass. He can make some plays down the field. I mean, I don't think he's the long-term answer, but if the Bears have Shaheen develop the way they believe he can, which I'm still skeptical of, then Sims is your long-term number 2, and that's not the worst idea. As far as Shaheen, I absolutely agree. I think Shaheen, people have been wowed by because he's been making tough receptions over these safeties and these Bears linebackers, but he runs very robotically. It's not a very fluid motion. Like, he's a very natural pass catcher, clearly, but half the time he doesn't look comfortable while getting in and out of his breaks. And as a blocker, he's still very, very apprehensive. It's not as if he can't be a good blocker. It's just that, like, to me, he's literally learning, because he didn't have to do it at Division II. He didn't have to do it, and there's like a fear, like, okay, so I have to take this step, and I have to bring this step, and I have to use my hand here, and I have to use my hand here. I've seen the Bears tight end coach in walkthroughs, literally walking through him. I'm like, oh, okay, this guy has a long way to go.
I think ultimately that's going to limit his early impact as a rookie. I mean, it was one thing at Division II where, because he's bigger and faster and stronger than everyone else, he didn't have to have good blocking for him. He just had to literally put his hands on someone and move, and they would move with him. So that's what's going to be his limit, or at least early on, in terms of getting him involved in the offense, which only bodes well for a guy like Zach Miller, or maybe a Daniel Brown, being more involved.
In the case of Zach Miller, because I don't know your thoughts on him. Do you think he makes his final roster?
As of right now, no. I think that could change, but right, if they made cuts today, I don't think he does.
Yes, because I agree, because Daniel Brown has actually been a surprise. Brown is actually, and when they've done some like blocking drills, I don't know how much you can evaluate about this, has actually looked better as a blocker. He's probably been the Bears' second best tight end thus far in camp. And Miller, I mean, he's kind of been another guy. I guess maybe he might be a big game time player. If anything, he had a vet day on Sunday. But aside from that, there hasn't been much to gauge off of him that he was the unquestioned incumbent starter, or that he's made much of a case to be retained over any of these young guys with upside. So, follow up, if I told you the Bears would keep Deion Sims, Shaheen, I think those are obviously two locks, but then also Brown and Ben Braunecker, if they kept those four tight ends, they actually had those four tight ends make the 53-man roster, what would you say?
I would be surprised only about Braunecker, because it's going to depend on what they do at the fullback position, because he's a guy that can line up there quite a bit and take over that spot if they want him to, but they haven't had him do that much. At least when I was there at practice, they seem to be high on Mike Burton, and not that Braunecker has been bad, but I think he seems like more of another practice squad guy for them this year, just because he hasn't been getting, at least again in the practice I saw, not as much first or even any first team rotation, and not as much all that much second team. At least he didn't seem to be getting a lot more opportunities than a Michael Pruitt, and certainly not a Daniel Brown. And I don't know if I just don't know how much he really offers you at this point on offense that you're not getting from your other tight ends, or that you're not getting from other people on special teams.
In the case of Burton, I would lie in saying that I can evaluate a fullback at live speed in these kinds of practices where they can't even go full contact. But I mean, he's really the only competition there, right? He's the only guy that we would assume could make this roster as a fullback, and he hasn't shown much at this point. So some of the SBN guys over at Pride of Detroit Lions, they told me how they lamented how the Lions used Burton last year, and then how he was phased out, and then obviously he's not with them anymore, and how he was a big weapon. But I haven't really seen any of that explosion. I haven't seen this. I mean, the way they hyped him up to me, they made him sound like Mike Allstott, if anything, which is all right. But if he's the only threat at fullback, does he warrant making the roster a guy with lesser athleticism versus, Ben Braunecker or even Brown? Brown, you're not going to line up in the backfield, but the Bears could mess around a little bit with it, have more versatility if they kept four tight ends.
Yeah, I go back to Paul Lasike in my head over and over again, and I don't understand why he was on the 53-man roster last year. His 7 snaps a game were not worth a roster spot, so I just feel like Dowell Loggins has this fullback fetish to just keep one there and let I think they clearly saw Michael Burton as an upgrade over what they got from Paul Lasike last year. But I was just looking at his stats. He's had 7 career targets, 6 catches, 1 touchdown. I mean, not a guy that had a lot of use in the Detroit Lions offense besides just being a blocker, and it definitely dropped off last year for him as opposed to 2015 when it was his rookie year out of Rutgers. But I don't know. I'm not expecting to see big plays out of the fullback position at all. I don't think we ever saw big plays out of Paul DeCike, maybe 1 or 2 preseason runs where they handed it off to him and he got 5 yards. So I have no judge at all of how Dowell Loggins is going to evaluate the fullback position, but I feel like they want Broniker to be more of a tight end and keep him separate from the fullbacks. And I don't know. I like if I would probably keep Zach Miller over a Broniker and just make Zach Miller your 4th tight end at this point. But just because I think a Miller offers you a little bit more. I don't know if Broniker is quite there as a blocker yet. I mean, he might be better than Zach Miller, but Miller's never been, super stellar there. But obviously Miller can still be an effective receiver when he's healthy.
Yeah, with Miller, it's just I like his game, but it's all about health. And he's 32 years old, and it's about what he can offer moving forward in the future versus anyone else. And I've appreciated what he's done in sort of stepping in for the now exiled Martellus Bennett. But if you're building for the future, you can't really reminisce on this past year and a half of relative success. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be a tough decision. Go ahead.
And Miller, the nice thing about him is his contract. It's only $1.5 million of base salary, a $2.3 million cap hit. So it's not as though like you could keep him on the 53-man roster. He could get hurt week 1 and miss the whole year, and you're not losing a big chunk of change like you would with a Lamar Houston or something like that. So I think we're going to see a lot of Miller in the preseason, and I think they're going to float him out there for a trade offer. I remember one of the Ringer NFL podcasts, Michael Lombardi, I want to say off the top of my head, back in March said the Bears were shopping Zach Miller at the NFL Combine and trying to find teams that would take him in a trade then, before they even had, I believe that's before free agency and, of course, before the draft and Adam Shaheen. So I think the writing has been on the wall with him for a long time, but he continues to get rotation into the first team at training camp and is still here because I think they want to try and maximize his value for a potential trade.
Well, if we were talking to trade, what would you characterize his value at? Because I can't see anything more than a 6th rounder.
Yeah, late round draft pick, but that's better than 0.
That's better than just cutting him outright. As far as partners, I mean, there's the Ravens. I don't know why the Bears weren't maybe they were. Obviously, I don't have the inside context on this. Weren't furiously pounding on Ozzie Newsome's phone as soon as Dennis Pitta went down. Or Steelers, who missed out on picking up an impact guy in the draft, who also need a tight end for Big Ben in that offense. Those are 2 potential partners right there, depending on how the preseason shakes out. Get that 6th rounder. You never know. You could turn it into a Charles Leno.
Yeah, right. No, I keep coming back to the Patriots too, just because of the Ryan Pace trade history with the New England Patriots. They love their tight ends, and they could find a role for Zach Miller in that offense, I'm sure.
Gronk and what's his name?
They have Dwayne Allen from the Colts too.
Yeah, Dwayne Allen. So Gronk, Dwayne Allen, Zach Miller. Okay, that's better 3-headed monster than anything the Bears have.
And they also traded for James O'Shaughnessy from the Chiefs. They have 2 traded for tight ends on their roster right now, and they might as well make it 3.
They value slot receivers and tight ends more than outside receivers, and I marvel at that.
And Zach Miller is a slot receiver. I think
essentially, yeah.
47% of his routes were run from the slot last year, off the top of my head, something right around that number.
There are 3 partners, 3 trade partners.
Boom. Get it done, Pace. we did the hard work for you.
We did the hard work for you. Now you just have to pick up the phone. You have the power.
Don't be shy.
In this year's, so this is probably this year's dumb training camp story, unnecessary hashtag Bears drama. This whole situation with Kevin White and new wide receivers coach Zach Azzanni. So earlier this week, Azzanni had maintained that he went back with White to watch college film with him of White in his best year at West Virginia to sort of more or less use it as a confidence boost was what some reporters who have been at camp characterized it as, that he needed a context boost, which might have, to me, might be stretching a little truth a little bit as to what he actually said to us. Then White came back firing when the Bears returned on Wednesday with a little bit of animosity at how that report was characterized from the Tribune. I think was who originally reported it, saying the main sentiment that I got from him when he was a bit irritated. He had a cryptic tweet that morning about something about sharing secrets. I don't have it exactly in front of me. That he's a big boy. He's a professional. He's 24 years old. That he doesn't need to be coddled by his receivers coach. That he didn't actually watch film with him. That it was with Kendall Wright and Victor Cruz, and Kendall Wright and him were watching film of their tapes in college, while Cruz was watching tapes of his glory days with the Giants, and that Azzanni never had any of that. So either Azzanni was lying, which would be a brutal mistake for a new position coach early on, but not necessarily anything too out of the ordinary. It's just publicized, at least to me. Or we have a case here where the media heard, oh, he's watching film with White. Oh, that means White needs a context boost, and or a confidence boost, and they immediately took it out of context and painted him in that light. I'm not sure where I exactly land on this story, but I do know what Azzanni said, and I do know how all of that developed.
Yeah, I find in these kind of situations, it's never black and white. It's never Azzanni lied, and it's never the media totally took it completely out of context and blew up nothing. I think there's always a little bit of both in here. Like I think Azzanni may have worded things vaguely that has potentially opened it up to then be taken out of context. And so I think it's a little bit of both. But I also feel like it was sort of, it was deliberate and intentional from Azzanni because, I wasn't at camp in the days following the comments from him and Kevin White, but from everything I had seen from reporters, Kevin White had much better practices after Zach Azzanni.
He dominated yesterday.
Isn't that the wide receiver coach's goal then? Wasn't that mission accomplished? No matter what he said, whether it's true or not, or whether it was taken out of context or not, it achieved the desired result of getting a better practice out of Kevin White.
He looked like a former number 7 overall pick. I mean, if you had watched practice on Monday, it was, or rather Tuesday, it was yesterday. Sorry, I'm all jumbled up because of today's rain. It was as if the Bears had 2 number 1s, and Kevin White was the athletic freak that was making grabs along the sideline, that was skying over defenders. He caught a deep pass from Glennon, tipped it to himself with one hand. He was making the kinds of plays you saw in the West Virginia, and there was a noted aggression. I don't blame Azzanni whether it was misintended or not for doing it. There seems to be people characterizing this, oh, this a grave mistake, or that he shouldn't be doing that, that there's a broken trust. Like you said, he did his job. He whether White doesn't have to like him. They don't have to have a perfect relationship. As a coach-player relationship, the coach is just trying to push his buttons to get the best out of him. White doesn't have to always appreciate him, doesn't always have to be on his side. There can be a little bit of fire there. This is a competitive game. And I think a lot of people, when they criticize the Bears for this, or they criticize the media for coming out of this, I think a lot of people don't realize that these things happen behind the scenes all the time. This just happened to be publicized, or Azzanni made sure it was publicized,
Mm-hmm. Azzanni seems like a smart enough guy too, where he's not just running his mouth, and he's not speaking off the cuff here. Like he knew that when he knew, okay, I know I'm going to be talking to a few reporters today, and I know they're going to ask me about Kevin White. So what am I going to say? Well, I know I need Kevin White to go a little bit harder at practice, and I know he listens to what the reporters say. I know he's probably on Twitter on his phone and following these reporters and sees when they tweet out my quotes. So I'm going to very deliberately say, some things about Kevin, nothing that's going to potentially, go too far and cross any, damaging lines, but enough that
he didn't say anything personal. He didn't say anything personal.
And that's his job. Exactly.
And as I'm sitting there today, and I can't really share anything else because it sounds as if the Bears show anything else in these close walkthroughs. But the receivers are warming up, doing like a little contested catch drills. Everything seems fine. You wouldn't think there was any kind of rift, or this huge rift that White is just absolutely peeved off at Azzanni, or that the receivers, or that he broke trust with his receivers. You had Victor Cruz and both Victor Cruz and Meredith lauding how much he's helped them grow as players already. And Cruz is a veteran. Cruz, the fact that it's anything is rubbed off on him, a 30-year-old guy who's a Super Bowl champion, who was a second-team All-Pro once, that speaks volumes. I mean, Azzanni is, to me, this was a controlled. I'll take this stance. To me, this was a controlled leak by Azzanni. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, it's like when you start a fire in a forest to clear off the brush, and it's controlled, like it's a fire, and you're like, oh my god, there's a fire over there, but like they started the fire, they wanted the fire to burn very specific things, and then the fire's put out, and the forest is healthier and better because of it.
As far as White on social media, that exact tweet I referenced, believe none of what you hear and half of what you see, and it was actually the NFL Network reporter that was there, Stacey Dales, asking him that. And that kind of set off this whole story. So,
and White has to know that when even if first of all,
he knew he was going to get asked about that. He knows he's a public personality in a big market. Absolutely.
And if you're the Bears, and like Azzanni talked about how he whether or not it's 100% true, he said we have to keep him from reading the papers and from hearing the voices. Don't you take away his Twitter account and just say, Kevin, this season, just deactivate Twitter. You can do it after the year. Just I don't want you to have, any of that on your phone. I don't want Facebook on your phone. I don't want anything. Just practice, focus on football 100%. You won't hear anything. Not that you can physically force him to, but I feel like you can sit Kevin White down and say, just delete Twitter. Then you won't hear anything from the fans. You won't hear any trolls. You won't hear any media stuff. Just focus 100% on practicing hard every single day and being the best football player you can be. And that's how you ignore all the noise.
That's an important point, too, to make with White, to be able to expand a little bit on that. People who, and I'm skeptical that the Bears can still get anything out of him or turn him into the original superstar they originally projected. He might still well be a solid number 2. But this is going to be a mental recovery process for him. This is going to be something that he's going to have to, he's going to have to string together a lot of games on the field without any injuries. He's had 32 available games as a pro, and he's only appeared in 4 of them. So there's a bit of as much as he won't admit it, there is something. I don't want to be like an amateur psychoanalyst or anything, but it's only human to have that in the back of your mind that, oh, something's going to happen when I come back, no matter how good you are, no matter how talented you are. And if he's using these, and I want to piggyback off that, if he's using these tweets or reading these clippings as motivation, that's making him angry and making him a better player. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, if it works for him. But the question is if it does more harm than good, based on what Azzanni said.
That's true.
Does it motivate him, or does it overwhelm him and put extra pressure on him and hold him back? That's the key. And I think that might be why they let him still, that they haven't been more locked down into social media is that they want him to be able to see some criticism and sort of try and learn how to manage that, knowing that it's out there and knowing that you're going to see it, but understand to not let it affect you. And if they completely shut him off from it, that's not going to help him be better at dealing with it. It's just going to eliminate him from having to deal with it. And so maybe they want him to at least be able to deal with it the same way that every other player is and learn how to handle the criticism and any of the outside noises.
Yeah, sort of channel that energy, because part of being a pro is even if you're a superstar, someone's always going to come at you and nitpick a part of your game. You might even still have a flaw. And technically, given his experience, he's still learning. As a professional, he's still pretty green. If we're just going off raw games, he's still a rookie, even if he has a couple camps under his belt, or if he had a camp under his belt last year. So we're a ways away with Kevin White. I'm not worried about him as a contributor. Again, like I said, I'm skeptical of him overall ever becoming a true number 1. But just people have to keep in mind that it's going to be a long road. People have to be patient if they want to see anything from him as like a consistent player.
Yeah, and we're a long way from the days of, what was that, 2015, when it was news when Kevin White first started running, like in mid-August. He was spotted running at Bears training camp, and it was like, oh my gosh, Kevin White is able to run now. So you can at least take a step back and say, okay, we're a long way from that.
Yeah, he's on the field now. He's healthy, and he's there. I'll say the best thing I can say to conclude this is he's at camp, able to be angry at being misquoted or taken out of context. That's something in and of itself. We're a long ways away from just running as being the most positive sign for him. So we're near the end here, but we'll have a little long segment. Let's open up the WCG mailbag, special occasion here. So while all the Ask WCGs, I'm going through the hashtag Ask WCG to see what we have here. Okay, so Jonathan Wood, he's a good friend of both of ours, right? I'm assuming.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay, so he asks, could you each name one under the radar player who hasn't been getting a ton of publicity that you think is having a solid camp? So I've been there every day. From the practice that you went to, who did you see? Who specifically stood out to you that wasn't getting a lot of acclaim?
I had a couple guys I was going back and forth here, but I'm going to go with B.W. Webb. The free agent they signed from the New Orleans Saints. Not that he was, shutting anybody down or, making a case to be a starting cornerback or anything like that. But I thought he was physical in coverage, was covering guys well downfield. Didn't make any crazy plays on the ball, but did a good job of keeping himself from even being targeted that often. I thought, he rotated inside the slot and on the outside a little bit here and there. And I thought he kind of just he was solid and maybe slightly above expectations, even if he wasn't spectacular, and that gets overlooked at camp.
Yeah, and he's a former veteran, or he's a longtime veteran too. So he's probably has a real long shot to make this roster. But he's experienced enough. He's played with the Saints enough to where there could be surprise depending on competition in the preseason. I've liked his game too. I originally prepared because I saw this question yesterday. I originally prepared for, ironically enough, Joel Buagnon, who I've liked as the third and fourth tailback the Bears have used so far. But they waived him today in an injury settlement. So my backup, I guess, so to speak, would be DeAndre Houston Carson. If people remember his original scouting report, he was more or less a special teams dynamo at William & Mary. And he's kind of showed out a little bit on defense too when he's gotten the reps. I was discussing this with one of our writers at Windy City, Andrew Link. Andrew even noted that he looked down at his roster card to check whose number that was. Oh crap, that's actually DHC making plays. And he stuck out in that regard as a safety. And he's much like Buagnar, much like any of these guys, has another long trek to be able to make a roster spot. But if the Bears value special teams as they have, Deontay Thompson, Sherrick McManus, Joshua Bellamy, those kinds of guys, if DHC wants to be one of those players, he's certainly not letting up in that regard. He's really stuck out in it anytime they've had those drills.
We doubled down on William & Mary players today. B.W. Webb also from W&M.
Yeah, if there's any sponsors from William & Mary, we do accept donations. We do, or some donors. Right. Next question. Jonathan actually had two questions. This is going to be. I will let you go first on this because I want to gauge what kind of person you are. Over and under 12 sacks for Leonard Floyd this year. Which do you take?
Oh boy, this is going to be
over or under.
This is going to be an interesting conversation.
You are talking to the number one Floyd fanatic, a Bears writer, Bears fan, whatever, on Twitter. I just want you to keep that in mind.
Yeah, so that's why it's going to be interesting when I say under 12 sacks for Floyd this year.
Under 12 sacks, all right, give me, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
There's a couple reasons here, and I don't want to start any wars, but I think I'm anticipating a little bit of a sophomore slump from him, not in the sense that he's going to be worse than he was as a rookie, but I think there's this expectation that he's going to double his sack total. And I don't know if he's going to make that jump in year two just yet. I just pulled up, there were 5 players that had 12 or more sacks last year. And a lot of them came out of nowhere. Lorenzo Alexander, Marcus Golden, and Daniel Hunter in particular. And he definitely has the potential to do so. But I think year two, more teams are going to have more tape on him. And I still felt like a lot of his production either came on plays where he was sort of the cleanup man, where Akeem Hicks blows up two blocks, which opens up a spot for Floyd to get to the quarterback, or it came against some bad tackles against San Francisco and Minnesota. And not that I don't want to take away, because he made some very impressive pass rushes and there were a lot of plays too that didn't result in sacks, but were very encouraging in just his ability to beat blocks. And we've seen him add more to his pass rushing arsenal. But I'm just, it's rare to see a player really produce a lot of sacks. And I think he can still have a very, very good season and not have 12 sacks. I think he could have a 10-sack year and still be phenomenal, but maybe not. To actually get that really high sack total, a lot of things have to come into play. And I think it's just unlikely that he individually produces that much, especially when you have, in theory, a healthier front seven with a better defensive line if Eddie Goldman's healthy and back, and if Jay Howard can be that better defensive end, Akeem Hicks obviously returning, and all the outside linebackers. I just don't know if there's room for him to individually produce such a high volume of sacks, at least in year 2.
Counterpoint. Counterpoint. Okay, so far, to me, and yes, there's also there's the caveat that guys in the line of scrimmage aren't always as physical as they could be. But in the two hardest practices the Bears had, and in the 4 full pads practices they've overall so far had in camp, I don't think this is hyperbole. To me, aside from Jordan Howard, because Howard has, I think I saw a question on this later, I think the Bears are sort of giving him the training camp treatment, star treatment, don't really want to beat him up. Floyd has been the Bears' best player in camp. You notice the difference in him. Anytime the defense is out there, he makes at least one impact play. His hand speed, his first step, he gained 15 pounds. He's 251. He's the listed 251 pounds now. He still has the same slippery speed and crazy first step. He's added the hands. He's added the power counter moves. So he won't be erased as much in the run game, or he won't be erased as much if he loses initially on a block. And in general, he just looks so much more comfortable. It doesn't matter who the Bears are throwing at him. On Wednesday, the Bears ran a double with him. I know it was 2 tight ends, but they still doubled him, and he immediately split it and blew up the running play. Or from the other side of the field, he came. These are just examples of comfort, is what I'm noting. From the other side of the field, he slow played a back. Sorry, I am tongue-tied. From the back side of the field, he made a play on a stretch the Bears ran to the left side when he was lined up over there, also for no gain. In coverage, dropping back as a linebacker, made the pick on Mitch Trubisky, or would-be pick. He landed out of bounds. On Daniel Brown, slipping out for a route late in the red zone, also sealed him away. He looks like an athletic freak that's come into his own. And if you have the healthy Akeem Hicks with him, or if you have, as you noted, the healthier defensive line with him, the Bears can run those stunts. Or the Bears, you noted last year, all these plays and these sacks he missed, for example, against Jameis Winston, against the Lions, where he had a 9-quarterback pressure game. He seems to add that finishing ability. That's what it's looked like so far. For him to enter that Khalil Mack, Von Miller territory, I'm hesitant to obviously put him like that. He's my boy. He's that dude. Don't know if he's that good, but 13 sacks, a little bit above that threshold. I certainly see it. Second team All-Pro, Pro Bowler. These are things he can do. These are things I can see now. He's 24 years old. If it's not going to happen now, across a 16-game season, if this is what you expect with better health, then it probably won't happen. It probably won't ever happen. He's at that physical peak where he has to produce now. That's as opposed to other guys where Khalil Mack is blossoming as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old in his 3rd or 4th season. So I'm going to go over, not comfortably over, but he's their best defensive player. And maybe it's camp optimism hitting me, but I see it.
And again, I want to emphasize too that, like, I think he can still be a Pro Bowl player this year and make a bunch of plays against the run and make interceptions and coverage and really be a dominant all-around outside linebacker and still have fewer than 12 sacks. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I compare like with a Vic Beasley, for example, led the NFL in sacks last year with, what was it, 15.5 this year or that year, which was phenomenal and a huge breakout performance for him. But I look at like the Atlanta Falcons front seven last year, and like he was really their only pass rusher. So like that's why it was easier for him to get 15 sacks because they could scheme other players to just occupy blocks. Well, he makes the plays one-on-one and gets the sacks. And I just don't know if there's enough sacks to go around because Akeem Hicks is going to get his 7 and Billy Young is going to get his 7. And if Pernell McPhee is healthy, he's going to get his 7. And I just don't know. There's only so many opportunities for sacks in games, the way quarterbacks are able to get rid of the ball so quickly. And especially the better he plays, the more teams are going to scheme against him in terms of adding an extra tight end, either double team him or chip him or have a running back come up and get him. And so I just don't know from a purely sack production standpoint that's where I'm hesitant to put him over 12.
Yeah, the most important thing for him, I think he has to at least hit that double-digit mark. And as you noted with Vic Beasley had those 15 sacks, but his pressure numbers were
low,
pretty paltry. They were low. I would prefer for Floyd to have 10 or 11 sacks, but sit around 25, 26, maybe even hit 30 pressures, much like the Bosas and the Max and Millers. That's a more productive player. That's a more disruptive player because sacks, people see sacks as a flash play. They're kind of like interceptions when it's not always reflective of the quality of the corner or the edge rusher,
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I still expect a superstar type season from him, even if he doesn't hit that threshold mark. But I'm still going to go over because, again, he's my boy. I'm not going to be impartial on that.
Can't blame you there.
So as WCG Mark, how am I reading this? Mark by Largen. I'm sorry if I butchered it. How has Jonathan Bullard looked so far in camp? I know he worked with Alex Brown during the offseason. Okay, so you just mentioned Alex Brown. So it's easier to see. The best way I can answer this, I'm not sure what your take will be. With interior linemen, particularly this early in camp, it's very difficult to evaluate either side of the ball. I think Wednesday was the first flashes you saw from Bullard and the kinds of player that the Bears originally envisioned for him when they drafted him in the 3rd round. First flashes you saw from Jay Howard and even Robertson-Harris too. But before that, I mean, the Bears haven't had enough full pad practices to where you could properly evaluate any of the linemen. I've liked Bullard. He's flashed a little bit. I've liked Roy Robertson-Harris. He's flashed a little bit. But I can't give a concrete judgment on that yet. With these guys, you're gonna have to evaluate them off of the preseason. That's the best thing I can say, because the Bears the camp is already almost halfway over, and there aren't many full pad practices left.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. That I mean, first of all, I didn't watch a lot of interior offense and defensive linemen when I was there on Sunday for very similar reasons that you mentioned. It's really hard to get a feel when they're not really going at it and they're not able to finish plays at the ball carrier. So I saw some flashes from him and from Robertson-Harris, but really hard to get a good feel until they play a real opponent.
I know people are a bit anxious because he's a high-priced previous draft asset for them, but I'm like, this isn't Kevin White. You're not sure yet. He was a rookie. He didn't have to immediately contribute. Wait till you see what happens in the preseason. If anything happens there, this is a contentious competition between him and Robertson-Harris and Howard. So that's when we'll be able to actually talk about it. Okay, so another question. Let's see. Matt Lee, do you anticipate a decline in Jordan Howard's production or stats? Everything you've reported out of camp is that the run hasn't been great. Okay, so I kind of answered it earlier. Howard, anytime he's been out there, has had great bursts and has worked the Bears' zone blocking schemes and stretches perfectly. But he also hasn't received much turn because, as I noted, I don't know what their plan is for him during camp, at least this early. But they're giving him a bit of the bell cow treatment to where this is a bruising back that's going to touch the ball probably 300-plus times this season. There's no point in wearing him out this early. There's no point in him taking unnecessary damage, especially against his own teammates. That's kind of the impression I've gotten so far. I wouldn't judge anything based off of what I've reported so far out of seeing in Howard as him dipping in production. I actually think he will more or less maintain. I don't know if he's going to hit 1,300 yards again, but he's going to play. He's going to start ideally 16 games this time. So 1,200 yards, 7 or 8 touchdowns isn't out of the question. Better receiving, that's what I'll say. He looks better as a receiver. But as far as me saying that he's going to dip because the Bears haven't been using him, yeah, it looks like a camp plan, if anything.
Yeah, I'm on the same page in terms of I don't think you're going to see him average 5.2 yards per carry again over the course of 13 games.
That will definitely drop off.
But that doesn't mean he's going to be worse, or like even if his production is lower in terms of yards and yards per carry, I think we're all expecting more touchdowns. But that doesn't mean his season is worse. I mean, I think we kind of got so used to how exceptionally well he played last year that people might feel disappointed when he's not when he's not as, I guess, magical in year 2. I think people are going to sort of know what more to expect from Jordan Howard, and it's not as though they're going to solve him. I'm not expecting a quote-unquote sophomore slump, but I do think his numbers will go down simply because it's very, very hard for NFL running backs to sustain 1,300 yards and 5.2 yards per carry in consecutive full seasons.
The 5 yards a carry especially, too. I mean, how many running backs do that regularly? Only 6 rookie running backs have ever done that in like the modern 21st century NFL. I mean, LaShawn McCoy, Ezekiel Elliott, Adrian Peterson. It's done very rarely, and to do that in consecutive years, I like Howard, but I'm not sure if he's that kind of Peterson skill set to where he's immediately loose and breaks in the open field for a 50 or 60-yard run for a touchdown. He's more of a grinder. He's a guy he's a very patient runner. And with higher usage of anything, with a higher volume, that'll bring his numbers down as opposed to having overall higher production in yards if that happens. So I wouldn't be worried based off of, a week of practice?
Yeah.
An off and on week of practice. Let's not have any Jordan Howard panic right now.
Yeah. I don't even know off the top of my head how many seasons Walter Payton even averaged 5 yards a carry consistent.
Yeah, Walter Payton was just abused because the rest of the Bears teams most of the time, the Bears teams he played on were crap, so they gave him the ball 300 plus times and he kind of made things out of nothing. Let's
slow it down a little bit with him, yeah.
What's up? Okay, so say another question, Catfish Jennings, what's up with Grisou? So I'll frame this differently for the question. So yeah, as we said, we can't value interior play. But as far as him making the roster, Lorin, the only way he would make the roster is if the Bears kept 9 offensive linemen. Do you see them keeping 9 offensive linemen? Okay, so I give you Charles Leno, Kyle Long, Cody Whitehair, Josh Sitton, Bobby Massey, Eric Cush, Jordan Morgan, if the swing tackle, just for this scenario, Tom Compton. Do you add Hroniss Grisou in there, who would have been the Bears starting center last year if not for a torn ACL?
I go back and forth on this because I'm not convinced. I'm not 100% convinced that Eric Cush makes the roster, and I'm not even 100% convinced that Jordan Morgan makes the roster. I'm 90%. I'm pretty sure both of them will, but it wouldn't it wouldn't completely blow me away if somehow they decided to cut Jordan Morgan after 1 year, because they did that with Tayo Fabulajay, if I remember, when Ryan faced his first draft. I know a 6th round pick versus a 5th round pick, and they know a lot more about Jordan Morgan, but I guess I'm 95% sure Jordan Morgan makes the roster, but I'm not ready to say 100% sure. And same thing with an Eric Cush, especially because he's been banged up. I think he is the better and more versatile offensive lineman, but I'm not ready to write him in pen just yet. And I think Pace is going to want to push Grisou to keep him on the roster simply because he was the draft pick, even if he might not necessarily totally be the 8th best offensive lineman. But man, it's tough. I would have liked to see, when Josh Sitton was out and when Kyle Long was out, Grisou be one of the first team guards, but they put Cyril Richardson out there and William Poles in their place.
Yeah.
And Grisou is doing some 3rd string right guard for a little bit there, and he's been the number 2 center consistently. So it's really hard for me to feel that out, just because he is that Ryan Pace draft pick, and I think they're going to be hesitant to move on from a third rounder after only 2 years. But I also feel like he's not as good as Eric Kush, and I don't know if they're going to get rid of Jordan. I think it's going to come down more to Jordan Morgan versus Hronis Grasu. Which draft pick do they really value more? And Morgan is the newer face that they got to get to know at the Senior Bowl. They got to know at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, they've raved about him. Technically, they love him. I don't know if with Grasu. I'll say this: it's kind of laughable. People have often asserted to me that the Bears should put Grasu at center and then put Whitehair at guard and move around the entire line. When you potentially have already when Grasu, I don't want to say Grasu's injury was like a blessing, but a blessing in disguise, and finding a potential All-Pro center in Whitehair, putting him immediately in probably his best position. So I don't know. I would say that Grasu's might get cut at this rate. I think the offensive lineman is more likely.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a strong possibility. And I think if this conversation would be even more difficult if Grasu had played better when he was a starter. I mean, and not that he was horrible out there, but I mean, clearly some of the issues that were haunting him at Oregon in terms of ability to anchor and just being a little bit of a smaller mobile center has caught up to him here, and it hasn't been really solved in his game yet. So preseason's going to be big for him, but I know they had Josh Sitton working on taking some snaps when I saw some warm-ups there today, and Eric Bush has been working as a center sometimes. I don't know what's happened to Taylor Boggs. I haven't seen him.
Taylor Boggs has a concussion, so he's out indefinitely. So
yeah, so there's room for some center work there for Grasu, especially if he can stay ahead of a Kush in that department while Jordan Morgan continues to play with the second string right guard. But again, would have liked to see Jordan Morgan with the first team when Long and Sitton was out. That really, Cyril Richardson and William Poles working as the first team guards. Even I know Kush was out, and so that it makes you look thinner. But the fact that neither Jordan Morgan nor Hronis Grasu was with that first team, it really surprised me.
Roster bubble this early in camp. All right, last question, and ironically enough, this is actually a good time as the last one we actually got. And I don't know what's up with my computer charger, but I only have 6 minutes of battery, so we can expand on this well enough. Yeah. As WCG E.B. I'm not going to say his handle because it's kind of ridiculously long. No offense, man. Which Bears have all-pro potential and which are our biggest liabilities? Okay, so I can take the all-pro potential. You can take the liabilities. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I say you're gonna get everybody mad at me if I start criticizing players that they like.
No, you can go.
No, I know. I'm just kidding.
Wait, who likes this? Who likes people on this? There isn't enough to go off of for liabilities and for people to like. But anyway, okay. So you want to go first?
Doesn't matter to me. Liability number one, Bobby Massey. He's always been a tale of two halves of the season. He's the Brian Hoyer, or he's the reverse Brian Hoyer of right tackles.
The reverse Brian Hoyer. I like that analogy.
Yeah, but consistently every year, first half of the season is awful. Probably should have been benched at some point last year if they had any sort of semblance of a backup offensive tackle they could rely on. And Mike Adams actually did end up playing at least some snaps momentarily when one of either he or Leno was hurt. I don't remember off the top of my head. But Massey definitely is liability number one. From there, it gets a little bit tricky for me because, I mean, a guy like Charles Leno is average. I don't want to call him a liability, but I wouldn't call him an overwhelming strength. Same thing with Mitch Unrein. Not gonna make a ton of plays, but not gonna get completely blown out of the water every snap. And I guess the way I'll put it right now, liability number two is going to be the starting cornerback not named Prince Amukamara, simply because we don't exactly know what it's going to be, and I'm not 100% confident in Kyle Fuller yet. And if Marcus Cooper, I still need to see him on the field in a Bears uniform, but I wasn't a big fan of him in Arizona, but it was also not a great scheme fit for him, and this is going to be a much better fit for him in Vic Fangio's defense, so he has the potential to be a lot better than he was last year. But it's encouraging that there aren't a whole lot of overwhelming giant liabilities, even if there might not be as many clear Pro Bowl players either, but we'll see what you have to say on that.
There are some depth concerns. I'll say that. I'm a little disappointed you didn't just light up the entire secondary. You could have just said the entire secondary is a huge liability. It's a huge question mark. Okay. as far as Pro Bowlers, all pro potential, anything like that, so the most obvious is Cody Whitehair. I think he's in line to be one of the best centers in the league. I think he might be, in time, he might be the best center in the league. Just how he's grown. He had one of the best rookie seasons based from people you work with, Pro Football Focus, based on that grading system, other than Travis Frederick and Nick Mangold in the grading era. And if you look at the landscape, I mean, it's going to be kind of easy for him to make that leap. I love Whitehair's game. I think you'll start putting him in the same kind of pantheon as Olden Kreutz, Jay Hilgenberg. There's a lot of quality there. He's that man in the middle for the Bears. Obviously, the second player, all pro. People would want me to say Jordan Howard, but there were a lot of good tailbacks. I think there are lesser edge rushers. So all pro, Pro Bowl,
Hall of Fame.
Be iffy with me. Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd will be a Pro Bowler this year. I'll be confident saying that. And if Vic Beasley can be an all-pro based off of 15 sacks and low pressures, then Leonard Floyd can be an all-pro based off 12.5 sacks or 13 sacks, but 30 pressures. So I will say those two. I think I think you can safely pencil those in. Those are probably, I mean, the three-headed monster from the 2016 class right now, until Mitch Trubisky develops, or if he develops, other than maybe Cam Meredith and Kevin White, those kinds of question marks. Those guys are unquestionably the Bears' three best players. So if I wanted to add a third, it would be Howard, but the first two, Whitehair and Floyd.
No love for Akeem Hicks or Jarrell Freeman there?
I think Akeem Hicks, as an all-pro,
maybe not all-pro,
it's very difficult. He has to have another kind of season like that, and the Bears, for him, his case has to sort of be made by the Bears have to be 7-9 or 8-8. Yep. That's kind of the unfortunate thing with a 3-4 defensive end. Maybe he'll put up the numbers of 7.5 sacks, 8 sacks again, but he has those two-gap responsibilities sometimes as a run defender, and that takes away from his candidacies, and people don't think of him in that light. Jarrell Freeman, I think, was probably on his way to an all-pro season last year before suspension. Yeah, he could be a player, but it depends on how he ages. He's 31 years old now, or 32 years old. I'm saying that off the top of my head. It'll be curious to see how he goes. He's one of the veterans. He's got one of the guys with a little more tread on his tires. That's the only reason I didn't mention him first. It's also camp optimism, so we're in that time of year.
I throw Eddie Goldman's name as a dark horse there too, if he could stay
as a dark horse Pro Bowler.
Yeah, not all pro.
Throw him out all pro. No. There are too many good defensive tackles.
Yeah.
No. As a Pro Bowler, though, yeah, I could agree. If he's healthy and he's on the field, then you have potential there. All right, that should just about wrap this podcast. I thought that was pretty loaded. That was pretty in depth. Lorin, this has been a long time coming. Thanks for hopping on, man.
It's been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to it.
That is Lorin Cox. He writes for the USA Today's The Bears Wire. That is correct, right? I'm saying that off the top of my head. And he writes for He's an analyst for Pro Football Focus. You can follow him on Twitter at CoxSports1. And you can follow me on Twitter, Robert Zaglinski, at Robert Zaglinski. Follow all our work at the Bears Wire, at Pro Football Focus, at Windy City Gridiron. I also have a Bears beat at the Rock River Times, write columns and analysis there. And follow us on Twitter at WC Gridiron. This has been WCG Radio. For Lorin, stay classy, everybody.